twice. Almost, man. I was about to be so mad. What's going on, everybody? This is Mike Hughes, a.k.a. The Shy Kid, and you are listening to The Shy Kid Podcast, presented by iHeartRadio's very own Give Us a Shot Network. So make sure you give us a like, give us a follow if you haven't already. A little rough start to this episode. I hate when I butcher something in the very beginning, especially an intro, but, this StreamYard stuff, man. This StreamYard stuff be throwing me through a loop sometimes. But, man, I'm here with a Southside legend, 35th very own Gave Wilkins, the State of Gave podcast, and so much more. You can find him on social media. I will link all of his affiliates in the bio below. So make sure you check him out. Give him some love. Gave, man, how we feeling?
I'm feeling good, man. Been busy, been very active. Just recorded the latest episode of the new 24 podcast. You can check that out on all podcast platforms. Just, recorded an episode of At Bat Podcast coming soon with Saul Rodriguez, Miles Porter. We were just on that and glad to be back on your platform once again. This time talk about some baseball action. I know we've been talking about a little bit of basketball here and there on previous
Yeah,
episodes and baseball before, but good to be talking about some diamond business.
for sure, for sure. Now, before we get into baseball, I kind of want to get back into basketball just for two
Ain't no
seconds.
problem. You
So
you know
you
we
and I,
versatile with that.
yeah, you and I sat up here about 3-4 months ago and talked about how Dalton Connect was the pick the Chicago Bulls should make. We also said Modest Buzelis has a chance of going top five.
Yeah, we
So
did.
looking back on it, Gabe, what are we rating Modest Buzelis as the pick for the Chicago Bulls and watching, we watching a baby JJ Redick in the making over there in the West Coast.
I didn't mind the pick for the Bulls when they took Matas Buzelis. I believe it was 11th overall
Mm-hmm.
in the lottery out of Hinsdale. Went to the G League for a year, got his feet wet. He looks like a guy that's not afraid to play through mistakes. He's gonna make some, but you see him starting to come into his own, and I think sooner rather than later, as you've been seeing recently, he's gonna start getting more playing time. He just
Yeah.
came off a career high 20 points. He shot the lights out against the Brooklyn Nets. Now, it's about putting it together consistently. As far
Mm-hmm.
as Dalton Connect, man, I thought he was the most polished player in the draft among the American-born players and the collegiate level players coming out of Tennessee. He's a much older rookie at about 23 years of age, but he's finding a way to get it done on or off the ball. Defensively, he's holding up. That was always the $1 million question with him. I think having JJ Redick as his coach, a guy who you say he reminds you of and also reminds me of as well, is really helping him in his growth and development, and he's giving him all the opportunities that he can as much as possible to succeed. Jared McCain's been balling too. So
Oh,
most of those rookies that was picked, 11 for later,
yeah.
they've been doing the damn thing.
We talked about it backstage that you're 31 now, and that's not a knock. Gabe stays with it, man. He knows everything going on. We're gonna get him in the TikTok game as well. But the TikTok game for Jared McCain is everything, and these old heads
Yeah.
are pissed that he's dropping 30 points on your favorite player's head and then making a TikTok right after on some girly 2010s type beat song. So like it's really dope to really see him flourishing because my boy he's currently at Marquette at women's basketball. He's the player development, was a former member of the Chicago Sky. Chaz Franklin, North Philly. That man a legend. That man does his thing. And he was giving me all the shit in the world about Caleb Williams painting his fingernails, and of course he's a diehard 76ers fan. So we just been going back and forth with it, and I think now we're both just like, yeah, we're cool with it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's just keep balling, baby. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
But man, getting into the baseball side of things, we were on the At Bat podcast, brought to you by War Media earlier today. That'll drop probably within the next couple of days. I'm not quite sure on whether it's a Thursday or Friday, whatever the case may be. But Saul, Miles, Gave, and I discussed everything from the World Series to awards to kind of getting into the offseason and winter meetings, but not really fully getting into it. So if you want to check that out, make sure you check it out. I'll link that, by the way, in the comments below after the fact. It'll likely drop in the next couple of days, but you can always check out War Media on YouTube, Instagram, or all social media platforms as well. But today we're strictly going to be talking about the Chicago Cubs potentially making several moves this offseason. We're also going to be talking about the Chicago White Sox, what they have going on. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. I know we're 6 minutes in. A lot of people were probably like, why are we talking about Modest Buzelis? Really getting into that, Gabe. Can you kind of take me through what this offseason has been for you as a Sox fan and a former writer? Really just breaking down how the Sox will go from the worst baseball team in the history of the league to giving you, like you mentioned earlier on the At Bat pod, it's only up from here. have you seen any strides of them trying to increase not only where their development is going to be in the future, but who they want to be?
I see them trying to make strides in that department. You see the hiring of David Keller, who
Mm,
was formerly in the Mets front office, who they brought in to oversee the international operation. I don't know if he's gonna be the main guy, but he's definitely gonna be the guy that's responsible for helping to construct and build, with future pieces come in the coming months. I like what they've done as far as getting the director of hitting in the building with Ryan Fuller from the Baltimore Orioles. We know what their track record has been as of late when it comes to developing talent under general manager Mike Elias, with the likes of Adley Rushman, a
mm,
Gunnar Henderson, and Colton Cowser, and a lot of other young prospects that are currently on the come up or on the rise, like Heston Kjerstad and the like. So I like that they're getting people from winning organizations and winning environments to come in and do the job, especially fresh off of what happened a winter ago or prior to the previous offseason when Chris Getz, when he first got the job, decided to hire um, Brian Bannister is his director of pitching, and also Jesse Barfield, two guys, or Josh Barfield, excuse me, two guys
yeah,
that came from winning organizations in San Francisco and Arizona. And Brian Bannister, of course, was also a part of that Boston World Series championship run in 2018. So I like that they bring in winners or people that have come from winning environments in the building to try and get this thing right. As far as what happens in free agency, I expect them to cut payroll, but I also expect Chris Getz to try and find a way to be shrewd with some of his signings, hoping that he can maximize the most off of minimal investments.
mm. Now, obviously, you look at the last 3, 4 years. You go from a manager that's dirt old, 80 plus, to now having a manager in Will Venable that is 42 years old. Can you kind of take me through the importance of that for you, especially with a very young ball club, kind of on the rise? We got a lot of guys in Montgomery and a lot of guys all over the place that are definitely raking right now. But by the time these guys come up, to be able to have a young culture instilled, how important is that for you? And you kind of mentioned it earlier, bringing in other guys who are the sons of former Hall of Famers and superstars, really just trying to get as many baseball brains in the building as possible because we know that might be where Jerry lacks a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, well, with the hiring of Will Venable, what I like about it is he's a guy that isn't too far removed from where these players once were.
Mm,
He knows what the day-to-day grind is like being a former major leaguer himself with the Padres among several other teams. And he was a guy that wasn't necessarily a star, but he was a glue guy, outfielder type guy, that defensive player come in here and there and deliver a big hit or two. Like he knows what journey that these guys are going on. He also has not only the background from a former player perspective, but also from a coach's perspective, considering the fact that he came up under a Bruce Bochy with the Texas Rangers, where he happened to win a World Series a year ago. And also under the Chicago Cubs with Joe Madden
mm-hmm,
and working alongside of David Ross, two
mm-hmm,
guys that combined together to go help break a 108-year curse back in 2016, 8 years ago. So I like that he's learned from a multitude of voices that provide different styles and mannerisms of leadership. And now he gets a chance to figure out how he can apply his own leadership skill based upon what he's learned and blend a little bit of both of that into trying to help this Chicago White Sox franchise go from the bottom to the top again.
for sure. Now, I kind of do want to pick your brain on this part because obviously there's a lot of pieces that come into play when it comes to signing a free agent. It's not the show where you can just offer a contract up and then the highest bidder usually gets them. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just comes down to where that player wants to be, what he's comfortable with. Does he want to win at this stage of his career, or is it all about the money? So when you have a situation like this, where the minor league guys for the most part, Colson Montgomery and others, might still be a year or two away. For some, there's some guys still in high A right now that may be 3, 4 years away. You have to find those middle of the ground guys, those bridge gap guys. And when we talk about bridge gap guys, I mentioned earlier, Eric Hosmer was technically a bridge gap guy for the Chicago Cubs for Michael Bush, but he was not productive whatsoever. Neither was Trey Mancini or Frank Schwindel or any of these guys. So when you talk about productive and meaningful baseball, who are guys that you want to see, whether that's second base, third base, first base, right field, wherever, that you would plug in right now that might not be a long term answer? We know Juan Soto is out of question for, both Chicago teams right now, but who's somebody that you might want to plug into this White Sox roster going into next season?
One guy that I've had my eye on just looking at the list of free agents that I wouldn't mind seeing him in a White Sox uniform is Reese Hoskins. You know,
Mm.
it's a guy that's been through a lot, had an injury prior to his contract year in Philadelphia through he tore his ACL, was out, but then managed to take a short-term deal in Milwaukee and still prove that he has a little bit of pop and thump in his back. I think that's something that this White Sox franchise can use. He's a guy that can also play a serviceable first base for you. And if he can do that, provide some pop alongside of Andrew Vaughn, and maybe like a DH role, or they could just split duties between DH and first base. I wouldn't mind that option for like maybe on a 1 or 2 year deal. And if he's good enough, you know, and you could get some prospects in return for him, you can flip him. But he can also be a veteran that shows these guys what it takes to play winning baseball and has that experience, considering the fact that he's played in the NLCS, he's played in the World Series, so he knows what it's like to get to a level that the likes of Costa Montgomery, Edgar Caro, guys that are gonna be up here next year, Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, they're gonna be up here sooner rather than later, and they're gonna have to play a part in helping the White Sox organization go from where they currently were to on the up and up. Another veteran I wouldn't mind being bought in if they weren't able to get a Reese Hoskins is somebody like JD Martinez, you
Mm.
know, on a short term deal. I know a lot of teams may not be willing to pay him the amount of money that he wants, considering his age, even though he has a very productive bat and he's found a way to fight Father Time. If you could bring a guy like that in on a DH role, you know, I think that would be great because this team lacks a lot on the power side, and they also lack quality hitters. And I think you need veteran hitters in the building to not only just help this offense flourish, but to show these young guys what it takes to put together quality at bats and eventually win games.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you. And where you went Reese Hoskins, I went Paul Goldschmidt. I think there's definitely a multitude of first basemen available this offseason that can, an Anthony Rizzo in a Sox uniform. I'd lose my fucking mind. Gabe, I wouldn't talk to you until spring training ended, bro. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, I think I would need a break from every Sox fan on my social media. But there's a plethora of winning mentality type players in this free agency pool, and I think it's going to be very exciting to see what happens. A guy like Paul or a guy like Reese definitely out there right now, trying to prove that they still belong in the league. Now, Reese definitely did prove that over the last 365 days, but Paul, on the other hand, 22 home runs this year, but definitely not productive whatsoever, to the point to where, the Cardinals are willing to dump him and Arenado. So, that's another name as well. I know the Sox wouldn't, offload a bunch of prospects for him, but to think that the Cardinals really didn't even give up that much to get him, I don't think their value is going to be sky high for him. So I definitely think there's a lot of guys that are going to be available within the next couple of months that we're going to flirt with. But man, really getting into it, man, it comes out today that the Chicago Cubs are shopping Nico Hoerner. And to me, it's not a matter of if they're going to trade Nico Hoerner. It's just a matter of when. Like, we've seen the Seattle Mariners monitoring that situation, which feels like the last couple of off seasons. You kind of heard whispers of it here and there. It was reported earlier today. Bleacher Nation had a great article on it talking about how, throughout winter meetings, they're going to be discussing the potential of a trade. Now, Nico Hoerner did have an off-season surgery that could potentially keep him out of spring training or maybe even the start of 2025. But, at the end of the day, you're getting a gold glove, and you're also getting an amazing bat at second base or shortstop every single day. So, from what I'm hearing right now, the reports are Brian Wu, 24-year-old right-handed pitcher for the Seattle Mariners, is probably going to be the headpiece. There might be a couple double A, single A guys that are thrown into that as well. But Gabe, kind of take me through how, one, a gold glove second baseman who bats 280 every single year is becoming available at the friendly confines, and two, what do you think the value of a guy like Nico Hoerner is right now in 2024?
I think his value is high for teams that are looking for guys that have a high average and a high OBP, which I believe Nico Hoerner possesses, and a guy that could just play solid defense. Like they're not looking for somebody to be a masher or a thumper.
Mm,
And when I think that's really what makes him the most valuable to teams that are in search of just finding that type of bat. Like we talk about Seattle, right? Seattle had an offense that struggled last year. If Julio Rodriguez wasn't hitting well, which for the majority of the season, he kind of wasn't the Julio Rodriguez that we've come to love and know and expect him to be.
Mhm.
that offense runs into a lot of problems. So having a guy like Nico Hoerner could possibly work wonders, no matter whether you put him at the top of your order or you put him at the bottom, to kind of serve as like a secondary leadoff man or what have you.
Mhm.
So I think that's what makes Nico Hoerner very valuable. I think a team like Seattle is looking for a second baseman that could provide them with a solid enough hitting tool to at least get in scoring position and allow guys like a Julio Rodriguez to send them home. But I could also see a team like Seattle being interested in like a player such as Gleyber Torres as well.
Right. For sure. Yeah, definitely. And I think the main difference there, and I think we kind of talk about that, is Gleyber Torres is one of the worst defensive second basemen in all of baseball, whereas
Yeah,
Nico Hoerner is a Gold Glover from
Glover.
2023. So I definitely do hear what you're saying, but I also think there's levels to it. Like, you have to play both ends of the ball, especially with a pitching arsenal that the Seattle Mariners have. A lot of ground ball guys.
Hmm.
So I think for me, really just understanding that you need that guy up the middle, kind of your quarterback. And who's to say Nico Hoerner doesn't end up playing shortstop at some point for the Seattle Mariners? Because that was traditionally how the Chicago Cubs brought him in from Stanford. I definitely do think trading Nico Hoerner does benefit the team rather than not. I understand he's become a fan favorite. This is a guy batting 280 every single year. Gold Glove defense at second base. You got nickel and dimes between him and Dansby Swanson. You love it, but I think at the end of the day, you look at what Matt Shaw has presented to you. You look at guys like James Triantos, what have they presented to you, and you just can't afford to have a guy who hits less than 10 home runs a year. When Nico Hoerner hits a home run, I go crazy. I'll run down the block naked because that's just how often it doesn't happen. So it's definitely something for me where you know it's interesting to see the return. If Bleacher Nation said earlier today that Brian Wu was going to be one of the faces of that trade if it potentially happens. And that to me is a telling sign that guys like Cade Horton, guys like Ben Brown, might not be such a sure thing in Jed Hoyer's eyes that they were maybe a year ago. Like you look at Cade Horton, who had an injury earlier this year and missed the remaining of the 2024 season. He's only played 5 games in AAA Iowa with over a 7.50 ERA. Ben Brown didn't get to finish the season, obviously had an injury as well. We're going to talk about Matthew Boyd in a little bit, but it seems like if they are interested in bringing in somebody along the lines of Brian Wu, that it definitely is possible that maybe you're not so certain that these prospects are going to pan out or at least be ready come 2025. So it's interesting, man. I love Nico Hoerner. I definitely do think he's going to be a big piece to whatever organization he goes to. Like, I know it's not going. I mean, I pray it's not going to happen. But a Nico Hoerner on the Los Angeles Dodgers is a fan favorite for life for sure. When you have guys like Freeman, Betts, and Otani around you. So yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting for the majority. But Gave, man, for you, really, where are you at right now as it pertains to the Garrett Crochet sweepstakes? We've heard a lot about it. We've heard what's going on right now on the South Side, that they're pretty much taking phone calls 24/7, trying to see what the state of that is. Where are you at with that? We might have lost Gabe. I kind of also noticed he didn't blink for like 2 minutes, but it's all good. While we wait for Gabe to get back, man, I'm definitely curious to. We'll just keep going with Nico Hoerner, man, because it's definitely something that you don't expect to happen. And I think we've heard a lot of rumors that there are teams potentially interested in him, like the New York Yankees, like the Toronto Blue Jays. But I feel like over the last couple of off seasons, we've always seen Seattle in the mix. They're always monitoring the situation with Nico Hoerner. They've desperately wanted him for quite some time now. And I definitely think the Cubs are in a situation to really just ask for whatever they want. Nico's really provided, an insurance to the Chicago Cubs defense and their pitchers every single day that, hey, no matter what happens, man, you got Nico right behind you. And with Dansby alongside him, has just continued to help him grow and develop every single day. So I'm excited to see what the future holds for Nico Hoerner, whether that's in a Cubs uniform or not. It's going to be interesting to see. Now, a guy like Brian Wu, while we wait for Gabe, I kind of want to get into Brian Wu because Brian Wu in 22 starts in 2024 allowed 39 runs, went 9 and 3 in the win-loss ratio with a 2.89 ERA. The ERA is there. Don't get it twisted. Like a 2.89 ERA is great, but in 22 games pitched to have 39 earned runs, it's definitely questionable. In 18 games pitched, he had 41 earned runs in 2023 as well, with a 4.21 ERA. Career 3.44. Definitely somebody that I find very interesting, somebody that definitely could be something for the Chicago Cubs, but also when you're trading away a sure thing in Nico Hoerner for a 24-year-old who's allowing 40 earned runs and 18 starts, it's just not as intriguing. It's really not as intriguing. So as much as Brian Wu could be the focal point, could be the face of what we hope to be an inevitable Nico Hoerner trade to make room for a guy like Matt Shaw, I definitely hope we get more than just Brian Wu. You know what I mean? Like, if we look at it right now, we'll look it up. The Seattle Mariners top prospects, you really kind of question who's really available, because I know they're not going to move the world for Nico Hoerner, but you definitely can't just trade him away just because you got a guy like Matt Shaw. Like, they have a top shortstop, Colt Emerson, who is in high A right now. You have Cole Young, who's in double A. So they definitely do have a couple prospects you can get in return. If I'm the Chicago Cubs, a guy that I'm really interested in is Harry Ford. Harry Ford, who's currently in double A, 21-year-old catcher for the Seattle Mariners. If you could potentially trade away Nico Hoerner and Cody Bellinger for Brian Wu and Harry Ford, I think you have something there. Now, obviously, that's one of their top catching prospects. We have Moises as well, so do we really want them? But I always say the more the merrier. You can't have too many prospects. So I definitely do believe the Cubs definitely have to get more than just Brian Wu. Based off of what we've seen from him thus far, you got a season where he's got 18 starts and 40 plus RBI or 40 plus earned runs. It's not good whatsoever. We're going to try to see if Gave can get back on here. His Wi-Fi went down, but that's all good. We're going to try to hop in right in a couple minutes. He's going to get in here. But yeah, man, that's just really where I'm at. That's just really where I'm at. We understand it's not a matter of if, but when Nico Hoerner is probably gone. He's probably not going to start the season with the Chicago Cubs, but maybe potentially because of the injury that he had at the end of the year, because of the offseason surgery that could keep him out of the beginning of next year, you might have to wait a little bit to see Nico Hoerner get moved, and you might have to continue to see where he's at. I know he was on the radio just a couple weeks ago discussing that there really is no timetable of when he's going to return or when he can get back in baseball activities. They're not really at that point yet. So that's something to monitor as well. Is he healthy? You might want to move him, but can you move him? Are people willing to wait that long? So that's really where we're at with that. But we're going to get into it right now. Let's talk about the topic that I wasn't ready for, man. I really wasn't even ready to have this conversation. I've been ducking it. I know we got a lot of content today, so that's completely okay. Matthew Boyd to the Chicago Cubs on a 2-year, $29 million deal with incentives that could lead up to $30 million. Where am I at with Matthew Boyd being a part of the Chicago Cubs organization? I'm not. That's really where I'm at, man. Like, for me, Matthew Boyd to the Chicago Cubs reminds me of Tyler Chatwood to the Chicago Cubs, a 3-year, $38 million deal where you kind of knew immediately after it happened that this was going to be a guy that wasn't going to be very productive for the Cubs. And I kind of feel the same way. It was a very 2018, 2019 Theo Epstein-esque move. And I don't mean that saying like to bash Theo, but really if you look at it past 2017, you're getting Carlos Gonzalez, you're getting a bunch of guys who, a Billy Hamilton, a Tyler Chatwood, guys who were has-beens or really never was, and you're kind of throwing them into this lineup, and it's like you're expecting them to be something more than what they are. It's definitely unfortunate to know that the Chicago Cubs had a chance to get a guy like Blake Snell or Walker Buehler or Jack Flaherty or Max Fried or, we got Sasaki still available right now that definitely could be added at some point. Definitely not too late for that. But to bring in Matthew Boyd, it just doesn't do anything for me. It just doesn't do anything for this organization. It doesn't thread the needle. A lot of people are going to say, well, he had a 2.50 something ERA in 2024 in 8 starts. You know what I mean? Like it's a good number. It's a great number. And what he was able to do in the playoffs for Cleveland, he was lights out. But the reality of the situation is you're not competing with the 2024 roster of the Chicago Cubs. You're competing with what the Los Angeles Dodgers are putting together right now on the West Coast. They're getting Ohtani back in their arsenal. They are just adding Blake Snell. You have guys like Yamamoto and Glasnow and all these other guys that are fully healthy. That's what you're catching up with. That's what we're doing. That's what we're trying to figure out. How can you compete with the Los Angeles Dodgers? How can you compete with the Atlanta Braves? How can you compete with the San Diego Padres and the New York Mets, who are throwing so much money into their organizations? That's really what it comes down to. For me, when I see the Cubs building the DraftKings casino and I see them building Hotel Zachary and the Marquee Network and all this other stuff, you hope that money that they're spending is going to come back so you can spend it on the field. I haven't seen that yet. I have yet to see them really go out there and spend like they're in the 21st century. Really, like we break down how Theo Epstein and Jed were kind of scarred for life about the Jason Hayward contract. But if you're going to let one player define how you make moves and you're going to be scary the rest of your tenure as the GM of the Chicago Cubs, then quit now. You know what I mean? Like, you can't let the contract of Jason Hayward haunt you forever. You can't let that impact you making decisions on bringing in a guy like Bryce Harper or Manny Machado or Shohei Ohtani or Juan Soto or, all these different guys who have been available over the last 4+ years. The Chicago Cubs were never in on all of them, to be completely honest. And I talk about it all the time. I talked to Gave earlier today about it. How differently would the Chicago Cubs of core looked in 2018 on if you would have spent money on a Bryce Harper? If you bring in Bryce Harper, maybe you do keep a Javier Baez. Maybe you do keep his Vegas buddy and one of his best friends in Chris Bryant. Who knows? But we got Gabe coming back on here. Gabe, we're just discussing Matthew Boyd being a part of the Chicago Cubs right now. 2-year, $29 million deal with the incentive of a $30 million deal overall. We might have lost Gabe already. I can't completely lie to you. No, wait, I think we got him. We got him. I think he moved. Okay. But you glitched for me for a second. I was like,
Yeah, same on
yeah,
my
yeah,
end. I'm
yeah.
like, what's going on with my internet?
All good, all good. But
Yeah.
Matthew Boyd to the Cubs. Gabe, this is a broader question than anything. What's going on with the Cubs? Because I feel like we talk about it time and time again about guys who are available and could be a Cub, and it just never turns out that way. Off rip, the Cubs say they're not going in on Free, they're not going in on Snell. Talk to me about what's going on with the Cubs right now and how they might settle for Matthew Boyd.
I think what's going on with the Cubs right now, man, is that it seems like they're an organization from the top down that appears to be resting on their laurels. It's like, well, we 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 won a World Series 8 years ago. The Ricketts family's built up around the Wrigleyville area. They turned this area from a neighborhood to like a college-sized campus. And as a result, they know that they're printing money left and right. They know that no matter what, fans gonna come for 81 home games a year and rock it out, especially during the weekend series, whether they play in St. Louis or Washington, Atlanta, doesn't matter in the National League. I think it's just a team that's rested on their laurels and they're banking on their prospects, their highly touted prospects, rising to the occasion. And while we know and we love prospects and what they could bring to a team from an energetic, youthful standpoint and a boost overall, to the fan base, every prospect don't pop out or
Right.
pan out, to be that superstar or that all-star player that you need them to be. And when we look at the Cubs roster right now from top to bottom, it's not really too many instant game changers that you look at and you say, hey, I know I could point to that guy as being the face of my franchise with a sense of
Mm-hmm.
pride if you're a Cub fan.
Right. No, for sure. And I'm kind of right there with you. We talk about it all the time. Wrigleyville turning into Wrigley World over the last 8+ years. I think the Ricketts came into this with the idea
Mhm.
of, hey, man, all we need is one. All we need is one, and we will have this fan base drooling at the mouth just to come back to Wrigley to see what the Chicago Cubs have built. After that, like I said earlier while you were gone, the Marquee Network, Hotel Zachary, DraftKings Casino. I was working at Wrigley while they were building DraftKings Casino. I remember
Right.
you go to the right field side where I used to host seats. They closed the bathroom for 6 months. I was pissed. No, but they really did though. But that should be my hiding spot from the months
Mhm.
of March through May when it was like 12 degrees in there every morning at 5
I
a.m.
feel you.
I was pissed. But it's definitely something for me, man, where we're seeing time and time again money get put into other things. And where Matthew Boyd did have a great 2024 season, like I said earlier, up until the playoffs, he only started in 8 games. You know what I mean? This is to me the Tyler Chatwood era of what was once the Theo Epstein led Cubs. You know what I mean? Like Tyler Chatwood getting 38 mil over 3 years from the Cubs. I can't call you a has been because you never really you were really a never was. You know what I mean? Like that's really what it is. And with Matthew Boyd, I haven't really seen that from him quite yet. And whereas he can be very productive, I just don't know what the future holds. But getting into it, man. I hope I don't lose you on this part of it. Gabe, do I still have you? I think we lost Gave again. And nope, we got Gave. We got
Yeah,
Gave. I don't know how long I have him, but I have him.
yeah. But
So right now, you said
what
what?
you saying about Matthew Boyd?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, my bad. I don't know if you heard. Did you get any of that?
I didn't get most of it.
Most of it, I
You
was
you you
basically
you was
saying,
talking about like he has potential and whatnot, right?
right, he's got potential for sure, and that's cool. But also, like we said, it's not a has been because it really was a never was, and that's really where I'm at with it. Is like you're bringing in guys who have been in the league for quite some time, but they really don't have a resume. Like if the Chicago Cubs today looked at us and said, "Hey, listen, we're not gonna get Snell." We're not gonna get, any of these big name Freed or Shane Bieber, any of these guys, but we'll take a chance on Walker Buehler. I would tell you the same thing I said about when we got Cody Bellinger, and I love it because the idea is you milk the last ounce of talent that they have or try to get a resurgence out of them, and then you
Hmm.
go from there. Maybe you can flip them later on. Maybe they're a productive part of 4 or 5 on a championship caliber team. You don't really know. But to not even go after guys like that and to settle for a guy like Boyd, it just really blew my mind. Now he did really show out in the playoffs. That's not a lie. He was phenomenal in 4.2 innings pitched. He was lights out, but it's definitely one of those things for me where it's just not enough at this point in time. But I want to get on the south side of things. We're kind of reeling it back after I I mean, I don't know. John Morosi was just kind of shooting the shit today. Water is wet and the Cubs are viable piece to potentially get a Garrett Crochet. I want to talk to you a little bit about the South Side. What's going on with the guy who is still under contract until the end of the 2026 season? First, how many teams do you think are really making calls right now? Garrett Crochet at this point in time, or do you think everyone's just waiting out the Corbin Burns of the world?
I would think every team in baseball would be interested in Garrett Crochet. I mean, he's a young starting pitcher in the game, just coming off of a career year where he won comeback player of the year honors. We know what he's been through health wise, but he proved through less than 150 innings of work and striking out over 200 batters despite being on an innings limit through the second half of the season following the All-Star break, that when he's healthy, he could be a dominant pitcher. He doesn't walk a lot of batters and so forth. And then, oh, by the way, he's on a cheap contract. So I would assume that everybody across the majors is interested in him because they know if they could get him, that they could sign him to a long-term extension. And it doesn't have to be an extension that breaks the bank. Anywhere between 100 to 110 million dollars, I think should do the job.
Right.
But I don't think you'll see too many teams being willing to pull the trigger when you got the Corbin Burns sweepstakes going down, Juan Soto sweepstakes going down, and oh, by the way, you know, you you gotta see how the rest of the market plays out as well. So,
Mm,
and on top of that, it's a lot of teams that may not have what the White Sox are looking for in the Greg Crochet return, which are positional players
mm.
who are not too far away from making their debuts in the league or have yet to make their debuts, but might soon be able to debut as early as 2025, if not 2026.
Right. Now here's my problem with it, right? Because this is the pipe dream I'm selling. The pipe dream I'm selling for Chicago Cubs fans is that the Chicago Cubs can trade for Garrett Crochet and everything can be Swiss cheese. Everything can be perfectly fine, and you're going to trade away an Owen Casey caliber player, maybe a couple other positional guys. Dave and I are going to get into that in a little bit. We'll play GM for a little bit. But my issue is I remember exactly what Garrett said at the trade deadline. And he said, one, I am a starter. And I will not be coming out of the bullpen. And two, if I am traded, I want to be extended. That to me is a red flag if I'm a Cubs fan because what you're telling me is we're not spending money on a Max Fried, a Blake Snell, or a Shane Bieber because we just don't want to spend the money. If you trade for Garrett, yeah, that's a less than $1 million contract. But if we're being completely honest, Garrett is only going to go somewhere where he's extended. And that's really where I'm at, or at least that is his hope. So it's like to trade for him is to understand you are in hopes to extend him. And I just don't see the Cubs doing that because then why wouldn't you be interested in Max Fried? Why wouldn't you be interested in somebody else? If you want to say it's because of the age, yeah, Garrett's young. Garrett's one of those guys, and he comes from Tennessee, so he gets down. He's healthy. He's ready to go going into the 2025 season. I have no doubt about it. But the Cubs' main priority this offseason was to not break the bank. And to trade for Garrett Crochet at this point in time, I just don't think is realistic. Because one, we've seen how Jed hoards all of these prospects. And two, like I said, that's what you told us, or at least that's what you told the White Sox organization. If I am traded, I am a starter or I am getting extended. No ands, if, or buts. So where are you at right now in Garrett Crochet's corner? Do you think that is still the case, that if a team does trade for him this offseason, he will be immediately extended or at some point in 2025?
I'm gonna say this about that. If you don't extend Garrett Crochet, if you trade for him, and he has a better year than what he had a season ago, to quote Marlo in The Wire, the price of the brick goes up. You know that you're either gonna do it now, or you're gonna wait until later. And Garrett Crochet and his representatives at CAA are gonna ask for a much larger bag.
Mm.
I think any team that wants to trade for Garrett Crochet, I think it would be in their best interest to extend him right away. You
Right.
don't want to take any chances. If you want, you could set it up or structure it creatively, where you put the money up at the top, you front load the contract, and on the back end it's a little less.
Mm.
If that's what you want to do, you can do that. But you look at all these starters that you just named: Max Fried, Corbin Burns, even like the Jack Flaherty's and so forth. They're gonna make a ton of money. So either way, you're gonna have to pay a price. And if you're a Cubs fan and you know that you have Justin Steele and Shota Imanaga is your 1-2 punch, why not double up on your riches and
Yeah.
see if you could add him to your rotation? Because you got to think about something with Garrett Crochet. He's been played around with for a great portion of his career.
Mm-hmm.
One moment he was a starter, next moment he's a reliever. He became a reliever because of the arm injuries. But he always believed in himself and his ability to be a starter. He talked about that at a wit's end prior to the conclusion of the 2023 season. Chris Getz blessed him with that opportunity, and he thrived in it and delivered in it. And I think what he was trying to do last year was protect himself from being utilized in a manner in which he didn't feel comfortable coming back recently from a Tommy John injury, in which he
Mm.
suffered a couple years ago in 2022 and had to work his way back through rehab over the course of a year and some change.
Right. No, for sure. And here's my thing, right? If you're a Cubs fan listening to this and you're wondering why the Cubs should trade for a guy like Garrett Crochet, trade away top prospects rather than sign a Max Fried or a Corbin Burns, I want to leave you with this. Right now, you're looking at the top 100 strikeouts in all of baseball in 2024. You look at the rankings, Corbin Burns is ranked 20th. You have Max Fried ranked 40th. You have Garrett Crochet at number 7 with 209 Ks. That's 20 more than a guy like Corbin Burns, and that's a lot more than a Max Fried, and he's also a hell of a lot younger. So that, for me, is everything. I understand that injuries are a part of it. That's a part of everything. You know what I mean? Like Shohei Ohtani just had his second Tommy John surgery, and that did not stop the Los Angeles Dodgers from paying him $700 million. That's not to say they are at all in the same breath, but you have to understand, you're not paying for who someone was. You're not paying for who someone can be. You're paying for what it is. And right now, at this point in time, Garrett Crochet has not only earned that right to be traded for some of the most top prospects in baseball, but also to get extended rightfully so. So I definitely do think it's something for me where Cubs fans definitely should be interested in this guy. I'm not just saying that because I'm a volunteer fan and I've watched a lot of him on the South Side. Like, this is a guy that I believe in. That leg kick since day one, I've been staring at and just salivating at the mouth over, because that's something you don't see every single day. That power that comes from his lower body, it's just something that can't be taught. You need a flamethrower on this team. You look at the Cubs, you look at them in the top 100 in strikeouts in 2024. You have Shota Imanaga, 27th, and then let's go all the way down to 70th is the next Cub at Justin Steele, who missed a lot of the season due to injury earlier on opening day. But that's really where I'm at. You need that guy. You immediately get a top 10 guy in the strikeout ranking. So I definitely am with you. But Gabe, let's try to make this happen, man. What do we need to do? If I'm Jed Hoyer and you're Getz, and when we're doing this little dance, we're playing around, trying to see what has to potentially happen in order to get Garrett Crochet in a Chicago Cubs uniform. Who are you starting with that you want from the Chicago Cubs?
Well, when you look at the Cubs, they match up as a great suitor from the standpoint of they have several position prospects that could fill a hole for the White Sox, not only just this upcoming season if they're ready to go and make it to the show, but over the next several years. The
Mm.
guys that I would be looking at, knowing that Matt Shaw is off of limits, as well as Cade Horton, I'll probably be looking at Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros, if not James Triantos, because a lot of these guys are going to be blocked. Kevin Alcantara is another guy that will have to be in that pool of players as well,
Mm-hmm.
because they have a gluttony of outfielders. You know, it's only 3 spots. So somebody is not going to be able to play in Cubby Blue, and you're going to have to ship off in order to address a need that your roster has. So I would look at Owen Casey and James Triantos being the top 2 guys that I would want, with Moises Ballesteros and Kevin Alcantara being wild cards. And I probably would want somebody off of the 40-man roster, maybe like a Jordan Wicks, a young arm, you know, to come back and return. Because if I'm trading away Garrett Crochet, which is what it's looking like on the Southside end of things, more it's going to be something that happens. It's not a matter of necessarily if it happens, it's more so a matter of when.
Right.
You got to get somebody that's going to eat up some innings in his starting rotation, because with the White Sox having a Noah Schultz on the horizon and a Hagen Smith, you know, serving as part of a 1-2 punch alongside of Drew Thorpe and Jairo Iriarte, that's a very young rotation. You got to get somebody that's established that can come in here and make a difference and sort of be like a workhorse for your rotation every 5th day.
Now, would you be interested in a Cody Bellinger?
You could sell me on Cody Bellinger, but the reason why I don't believe that the White Sox would be
Right.
is because, for one, I believe that they're trying to cut payroll. I think Cody Bellinger would be a hell of an addition, but are you getting Cody Bellinger back solely for the purpose of holding on to him over the course of the season, or do you want to have him build up his value and then trade him at the trade deadline? I mean, I wouldn't be against Cody Bellinger,
Right.
because I feel like the White Sox are in a position where their beggars can't really be choosers.
Exactly.
You know, and when you're at the bottom of the league like they were in most offensive categories, you know, Cody Bellinger would be great here in the ballpark. But I just feel like that's a move that, in my opinion, the White Sox should have made a couple of years ago when they were seeking to compete during the first year of the Pedro Gaffal era.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I don't really know how he fits long term, but I wouldn't be against it.
Right.
But I wouldn't like him being my headliner necessarily.
For sure. Now, just shooting the shit for a little bit, I am curious. We talk about James Triantos, talk about Moises and all these guys in the minor leagues, all chilling just in Des Moines, Iowa. But if you can kill 2 birds with one stone, do you do it if you're the Chicago White Sox organization? Because you definitely do need a leader in this ball club while also getting top prospects in return. Gabe, if I'm the Cubs GM and you're the White Sox general manager, and I came to you and I said, I will give you Owen Casey and Nico Hoerner for Garrett Crochet today, do you do it?
Mm. It wouldn't be the first offer I take. It would be an offer that would make me think, because I know Nico Hoerner's a guy that could play up the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You do need a second baseman, but as you said earlier, Nico Hoerner is not a guy that hits for much power.
Right.
But Nico Hoerner also can hit for average. He has a high on base percentage. You know, that's something that can be desperately used on 35th and Shields. I wouldn't be against it, but I would be more intrigued by what the other team has to offer, such as maybe the Boston Red Sox. You know, when I look at the top prospects that they have,
You want
you
to do that
know.
again? You want to do that after what happened with Chris Sale? You want another
Well,
Machado?
well, you can't base it off solely the Chris Sale
I
trade,
know.
because you
Did
know
you see?
different
Did you
different
see?
different GMs, different administrations at the time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be afraid of that, because I don't believe that the Boston Red Sox would be willing to trade away a Roman Anthony, who's the number
Mm-hmm.
one prospect, or soon
Right.
to be the number one prospect in baseball, according to what publications you read. Also, a Cal Till, a guy that I
Mm-hmm.
was very high on. I want the White Sox to draft prior to them making a trade with the Angels to get Edgar Carroll as part of that Lucas Giolito trade.
For sure.
When I look at Boston, I look at a guy like Christian Campbell, who can play second base, could
Mm-hmm.
play shortstop, could play outfield and hit. You know, that's a guy that I wouldn't mind. He's close to being ready,
Right.
you know, to make his debut. That would be a guy that I would want. Another guy that I probably would want out of there, if it was a way that you could get him, is maybe like a Marcelo Mayer,
Right.
something like that. Like they gotta look, or Sedan Rafaela, you
Yeah.
know, who could play multiple positions, has
Mm-hmm.
a lot of untapped potential. I think other teams like Baltimore, but the Cubs, like if you're looking for prospects in particular, that's a team I could look at. But I'm not. If I'm looking for like a 40-man roster piece, I probably want that guy off the 40-man to be a pitcher.
Right. All right. I can get down with that. I can understand. I listen, for me, the highest I would go from a prospect standpoint is Owen Casey, James Triantos, and I would throw in a Hayden Wesneski just because I don't think if Hayden does figure it out, I don't think it's going to be here. You know what I mean? I don't think there's a place for him at this point. He's part of the 40 man. He's a guy you can have on the roster. A Jordan Wicks is also one of those guys that I definitely think could be in conversation as well, just because you got way too many arms right now and we got to dump a couple of them, you know, and if you're getting one of the better arms in baseball in return, I think that's a sacrifice you're willing to make, even if we do have 3 lefties in the rotation. But I hear what you're saying, especially if you can't think about history's past. But even John Morosi just had to throw in the fact that the Cubs traded away Eloy Jimenez and Dylan Cease for Quintana. Don't know why that had to be a part of the tweet, but he felt like it was necessary. But Gabe, man, I appreciate you being here, brother. I appreciate you tuning in. I know you got some basketball to get to, so we'll let you get going. But make sure you guys check out Gave Wilkins, the State of Gave podcast, on all social media platforms. We're going to be able to link him in the bio below to be able to check him out on Instagram, X, and I don't know if he's on that new Blue Sky, whatever.
No, I'm not on Blue Sky, but
I ain't
also
on that either yet.
Yeah, I'll also make sure to check out the new 24 with my man Torrin Stacker. That's available on all podcast platforms. We just dropped episode 4 today talking about the Golden State Warriors losing skid, the Memphis Grizzlies hot start coming into the month of December with a top 3 seed in the West, as well as the Boston Celtics, the Philadelphia 76ers, and top games you need to be watching for week 7 across the association. So we got a lot coming over the month of December on the new 24. That's definitely going to be a podcast that we seeking to get popped off and activated for sure.
Most definitely. I'll be checking it out, making sure to see Steve Kerr blowing up on every single ref and officiate in the building. Let me get out of here before someone calls an unnecessary timeout. But we appreciate you guys tuning in. Appreciate you guys being here. Make sure you give us a shot. Give us a like or follow if you haven't already. I am Mike Hughes, a.k.a. The Shy Kid. You are listening to The Shy Kid podcast presented by Give Us a Shot. Till then, peace.
Give them a shot to do what?